Okay.
Now in progress. Go.
Great. Got it. Let me just get rid of that. Yes, so welcome. It's been an exciting day trying to organize and ensure that everyone could join this Zoom meeting. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Perry, for making this possible. And I'm delighted to see that we have 94 people. I think our maximum is 100. So this is very, very thrilling that we dodged the bullet, as they say. Couple of announcements. Please check your email or your junk mail, because the acceptance notices as to our show coming up they have been sent. But apparently not everyone has opened up their email. So it is coming from a TWS email address. And it is very important that you read all the details concerning our upcoming show. As you were told in the call for entry, all the paintings need to be framed. So if you are accepted, this is your opportunity to get your paintings to the framer. We are hoping that we're going to be able to have the in-person show at the gallery. And so we're gearing up for that. The show chairs will be calling on some people for assistance, and please donate your time. It is for a very good cause. We haven't been in the gallery for quite a while because of COVID, and we have to ensure that everyone will be safe and everyone will be following the time frame. As to our presentation tonight, just another reminder of Zoom courtesy. I realize that we are so eager to know every step that Joel will be taking and what colors he'll be mixing, but please pose your question to the chat line, and Heather will be able to relay your question to Joel at the appropriate time. We all know that when you're painting, you have to concentrate on what you're doing, and we do not want to interrupt or offer advice as Joel is doing his demo. After he's done, hopefully you will have a chance to pose questions directly to him, but during his demonstration, please stay muted. If you have a question, put it in the chat box. So let's enjoy. This is going to be so much fun. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you. I'm going to just pin Carolyn and Margaret. There's a question in the chat about framing if you want to grab onto that.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. There you go, Carolyn. You have to unmute. Unmute.
Well, I don't know what I look like on your screen, but on my screen, I'm just a lot of dots. I don't know what's going on here.
I think it's just your internet maybe, but you look fine. You're good.
Okay. All right. I'm just so honored to introduce Joel Popadics to the entire Toronto Watercolour Society. Many of you got to take a workshop with Joel that George Eady and I organized last November, and it was a resounding, successful workshop. Everybody painted a lot of paintings and really enjoyed it. So we decided to invite Joel for a demonstration. And here he is tonight. A little bit about Joel. Joel's been painting as a professional artist for over 30 years. His watercolors have been in solo and group exhibitions right across the United States, and in such places as the National Academy of Art and Design in New York, in the Place St. Charles Gallery in New Orleans, and in San Francisco at the Academy of Arts. His annual, he's always in an annual exhibition at the International Marine Art Exhibition in the Maritime Gallery at Mystic Seaport in Mystic, Connecticut. I'd love to go there. I've heard a lot about this place. His paintings are in public and private collections, most notably the Arts for Healing, and many of his paintings have raised money for such foundations as Make-A-Wish Foundation, Table to Talk, Food Bank Network, and the Lamb Foundation. He's a recipient of many national awards. He received the Edgar Whitney Memorial Award from the Hudson Valley Art Association, the Grumbacher Gold Medal from the California Watercolor Society, and the Silver Medal twice of honor from the New Jersey Watercolor Society. He has been featured, and if we look back in our old magazines, he's been featured in American Artist, the Artist magazine, Watercolor Artist, Watercolor Magic. So if you look back in your collection of magazines like I have, I'm sure I'm going to find him in many places. Joel is an advocate of watercolor and has dedicated his career to the advancement and appreciation of the medium. That's why he made an ideal judge for our jury. And as I told him, he's the first American artist we've had judge us. So it's quite an honor, Joel. And he has been, he's currently vice president and treasurer of the prestigious American Watercolor Society, probably one of the oldest watercolor societies in the US and worldwide, with members worldwide in it. He also was president of the New Jersey Watercolor Society. So he's been around watercolor for a lot of years, as I said. During the summer, he likes to go out and paint on location, something that attracted me to him when I was kind of surfing the internet, I guess, when the pandemic happened. And I was so enthralled with the way he painted the coastal scenes, much like I learned years ago going to Rockport, Massachusetts, where he has painted. So it interests me a lot. He teaches at, he has taught at the Parsons School of Design. He also does classes regularly at, the Art Institute in New Jersey. And he's an artist, been an artist resident at Sherburne Farms in Sherburne, Vermont. And he teaches adults and children at the Ridgewood Art Institute in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where he's been on the board. He was born, I should put this in because a lot of people think of the Parsons School of Design as just fashion, at least that's what I grew up in thinking. But he was a lecturer and has been at the Parsons School of Design and teaching, as well as the King's College in New York City. So his accolades are very, very high, and we're so honored to have him. He lives in New Jersey. I actually phoned him because I was worried about the floods from the hurricane there a couple of weeks ago, but he was okay. He received his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the School of Visual Arts in New York. And he's represented in some of the finest galleries in the East. And he lives in Wayne, New Jersey, with his wife, Patricia, who's also a teacher, and their two sons. So without further ado, Joel, looking forward to seeing your demonstration.
Okay, Joel, you gotta unmute.
Oh, okay.
There you
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for that nice introduction. I'm going to switch cameras here. You can see the painting next. Can you, are you getting feedback, Heather?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And you see the iPad too, right?
In the background, I see a TV. Oh, you mean here? Yeah, hold on. Let me just go grab it. We can double check the. There's a lot of people here. So, oh, we're up to 100. Look at that. And I want to make sure. Does it say
It should say Joel's iPad.
Joel's iPad? Okay, because we've got a couple iPads. There it is. So I might see if I can. Is everybody still on Spotlight? Somebody can let me know.
Yeah, it's on Spotlight and it looks great. You can see the
Okay.
sketch.
Okay,
You
perfect.
can see my palette here then, right?
Right now I've just got you. I'm
Good.
just gonna go find your Can't your paper? Oh, there you are. I get it there. Oh, look at that. Maybe we'll try both at once.
Can you do that?
Yeah. So people can let me know if they want to switch. If you want it bigger, you can go full screen. And if everyone just, when they message, just message to me directly, then your chat box won't pop up.
Okay, great. See everything good in there. Perfect. All right. I'm gonna do, Carolyn asked me to do a New England scene. So I'm gonna do a contre-jour effect, and a contre-jour effect literally means to look into the direction of the sunlight. And a lot of artists like to do that. I notice, I see a lot of paintings, landscape paintings these days where people have a picture where you're looking into the direction of the sun. And what it does, it's actually a good way to paint for a lot of people. It's a lot easier because you see simple silhouettes. The values are very dramatic. You see very stark lights and very, very, very dark darks. So for that reason, it's a good thing to, if you've never tried painting contre-jour, it's probably a nice thing to do. I'm going to start by wetting the entire sheet of paper. I'm going to get it soaking wet, and I'm going to work light to dark. So that means I'm going to start with my sky and then work towards my darks. I get the whole thing. I'm working on fairly heavy paper. It's 300-pound Arches rough. And I'm getting it soaking wet. So wet, I can see a shine on the paper, which is what I want. I'm trying, I'm looking at the glare on the paper to make sure I haven't missed the spot. So in this first wash, I'm going to resolve the sky and the reflection of the sky in the water. Some days we consider to be orange or reddish, which means that there's a progression, or there's going to be a progression in our sky from so there'll be a progression in my sky from slightly blue along the top to orange, something warm along the horizon. So I'm going to take some cadmium orange. I'll just pour it on. I also want this color to get into the reflection. And I've got some white boats in here that I want some color in them as well. I'm going to take a little Windsor blue. This is Windsor blue green shaded. I'm going to mix it with some cobalt blue. Yeah, we'll just pour it on. And we'll roll the paper around to blend evenly. So I got my color a little warmer along the horizon, a lot bluer along the top. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom of the water. I'm going to get that a little darker. The general rule with reflection goes, things that are light reflect a little darker. Things that are dark reflect a little lighter, and things around the middle value reflect about the same. So I want to get the reflection in the water just a little darker than the sky. Heather, you can hear me okay?
Yep, you're awesome. I'm just like,
Good.
oh my God, he's pouring water.
And I'm also, my boats are going to be white, but I want some color in them as well, in the white part. And I suppose that's probably a good idea to think, which of these boats do I really want to feature? Think about compositions and stuff. This would probably be a good spot. Certainly that one might be the one that we feature. So the one that we feature, you might want to get a little, want to get a little extra color. Bear in mind that if we all know that watercolor dries lighter than it looks when it's wet. So the colors might look a little rich right now, but of course they're gonna lose their
I have a question about
luminosity.
your palettes.
Sure.
How do you decide, like, you got a lot going on over there. How do you decide what's going
Well,
on?
I've got a palette for my cool colors. I've got a palette for my warm colors. I've got some violets, a combination of blue, the smaller palette. They're basically a repeat of that, but there's some violets in this palette. And then I have a palette for my greens, which I pre-mix.
Okay.
And then this is my general big wash palette.
Okay.
I have a table that I just bought in an antique. It's an antique table. I think they call it a Hoosier table. And it's a table with a porcelain top, white porcelain top. And I'm finishing the bottom of it. And I'm gonna put a nice stain on it. And my studio is a mess at the moment, but I want to, I'm gonna redo my studio, and that's gonna be my featured palette. And it's basically one of these porcelain palettes, really large.
Wow. Lots of space.
Yes. I'm gonna roll this around a little bit more. You start to get the streaks in it, the lines coming down, and if you don't want it to look like you got rain, then tip it this way, and that'll blend out evenly the wash. The paper is basically soaking wet right now. And I know it's soaking wet because, like I said earlier, I can see a shine on it. That's the first stage of wetness. The second stage of wetness is when the shine just begins to disappear, and that's considered to be moist. And that's what I'm waiting for right now, because there are going to be two things that I want to do. I want to put some clouds that are backlit, they'll be in shadow. I'm going to get some clouds in shadow along the throughout the sky. And then the other thing that I want to do before the surface of the water that we can see dries, I want to put a couple ripples in the water, a couple lines that, and when I work in wet paper, I'm going to get a nice soft edge to my cloud forms. And that's why I'm kind of really paying attention. I got I'm paying attention to how wet the paper is. Like I said, at the moment, I can see it's, if I tilt it this way, you can see the shine on the paper, which means it's saturated. In a few moments, the shine will disappear and it'll be moist. And then when we work into wet paper, you'll get a nice softening to our clouds and to our ripples in the water. And there's nothing worse than watching paint dry, because that's basically what we're doing right now.
I'm just going to mention to everybody, in case people are watching in full screen, if you have a question, send it to me directly, just so that people don't get the chat pop-up box when they're trying to watch. Thank you. It's 300-pound rough paper, correct?
Yes, that's right. It's 300.
Okay.
I work on basically 300-pound rough or cold pressed. I have a artist that I admire. His name is Ogden Pleisner. Ogden Pleisner, maybe some of you have heard of. He lived. He died around 1984. He was around for World War II, and he was an artist. The United States wanted to commemorate battles, and he was painting battle scenes and stuff. Anyway, Pleisner studied with my teacher's teacher, who was Frank Vincent Dumont. And I'm very proud of that. There's a connection between him. And I teach, I think Carolyn had mentioned, I teach up in Shelburne, Vermont every summer. And at Shelburne, Vermont, there's a restoration, and they've taken his studio from Vermont, and and from Manchester, I think his studio was, and they moved it up there, and there's part of it, and they have a largest collection of his watercolors. And he used to, I thought it was kind of interesting. He used to work on rough paper, but when he had a figure or something that he wanted to include in his painting, and he wanted more of a cold press surface, what he would do is he would take a burnisher and he would rub the paper down. So he would remove, in essence, the rough paper and create a part of the paper that was cold pressed, which I thought was a really cool idea. But he
You ever done
preferred
that? Have you ever done
no,
that
but
in your
I think
paintings?
it's a great, I think it's a really cool idea. And I
Yeah.
prefer, I prefer the rough paper for my landscapes because we want that texture, in trees and things sometimes. But it's also nice to have that option where you can actually rub it down and make it a different surface. I think it was a really cool idea.
It's very cool.
I'm taking some cobalt blue and a little bit of ivory black, plus a little bit of cadmium red medium. And I'm making a blue violet kind of shadow for our clouds. So I loaded the brush. Now I don't want to add more water to the paper at this point because you can start to see the paper is beginning to arrive at that second stage of wetness, moist, because the shine is just starting to disappear. If I add water now, I'm going to get blooms all over the place. So what I want to do is I want to add mostly paint, hardly any water. So I load up the brush with my color that I'm going to use for the clouds. And then I dab it into a paper towel, gets rid of the excess moisture. And now I could begin to put a few cloud forms in my painting. And you can see that the paper's, because it's wet, I'm getting a nice soft edge to my cloud shapes, which is exactly what I want. So again, every time I reload, I dip it into a paper towel and I remove the excess water. Now I'm basically adding color to the paper and not extra water, because if I did add extra water, this would go horribly wrong and there'd be blooms everywhere.
What
like
kind
this.
of tape? What kind of tape are you using to hold your paper down?
Oh, just regular Home Depot masking tape.
Okay. That's all
I
right.
have, I don't want to waste my good white drafting tape on the edges of the paper.
Right.
And I was having a problem trying to find a good tape with a good tack, but the one they sell, it's a Scotch brand. It holds up pretty well.
Is that what kind of brush are you using?
This is a 1/2 inch flat. It's a Robert Simmons brush. I really love it. I used to work for an artist, one of my professors when I graduated school, and his name is James McMullen, and he's really an amazing watercolor artist. And Jim only used to use round brushes, so that's what I did. I was only using round brushes when I also worked in commercial art for a few years after I graduated from art school. And so when I switched over to landscape, the round brushes weren't very convenient. And I remember when I was working in oils and doing landscape, we'd only use flats extensively. So I went out and I bought a whole bunch of these flats, and I've never really looked back. I use them all the time. They're really my workhorse brush. I still use a good round every now and then, but I really prefer to work with these flats.
Are you working from a photograph?
Yes, I do have some reference. It's not very good, but
They're wondering if they can have a look at the reference photo when you have a moment.
There you go.
Oh, it looks black and white.
It does, right? That's why I said
Yeah.
it's not very good, which is good.
Okay.
Because I'm going to be dealing with basically silhouettes, and I'm also just inventing the sky.
Right.
And I want to get a little rhythm going into my sky with these clouds, and I've kind of put them on the angle. You can think of it two ways. The viewer can enter the painting through this little light area, and like a Z or an S, they can go down from here back into this area and back into the composition. Or you could think of that, there's a little smaller cloud. The viewer could look at the clouds and just lead their eye back down into the composition. Shouldn't just randomly put a bunch of clouds in. think about where their placement is and how they might direct the viewer's eyes. And I love this point of the process. Putting these clouds in here, you really feel like, the creator putting in a sky, and when later on, you'll notice that when I start getting the hard edges within the landscape, there's a nice contrast between the hard edges of the landscape and the soft edges of the clouds. And they really feel distant because they're so soft, and feel far away, and you get a nice spatial quality in your painting. Now, the paper's still moist along the bottom. It'd probably be a good idea to get some of the clouds in the water as they reflect in here. And I know there'll probably be a little bit of these clouds will probably reflect into here. So I'll include that just really kind of quickly. I don't know if you'd see those things in the reflection. You might see that one here. So make sure they line up. And just hint at it. And now, but the other thing that I want to do with the water is I want to put a couple of ripples into the water. Even though it's going to be basically a dead calm on the surface of the water, I'm going to get some reflections of the boats in a minute when the paper's dry. But then on the surface of the water, you might notice some, there's a gentle undulation in the water, and you'll just notice a couple curvy lines in the bottom, and that will also help direct the eye, or perhaps in this case, contain the eye on our painting. So I'm going to load up some Payne's Gray again, cobalt blue and ivory black. I mix my own Payne's Gray. I don't buy it. Load up my flat brush. And I'm going to quickly put a couple ripples into the water. I want to make the ripples in the spacing in the front a little bit more ripples in the water up front. I have them on an angle too. But as I get closer to the horizon, there's going to be less. The ripples are going to be less in number and more level in relation to the horizon. And that should do it for the sky and the reflection of the sky in the water. And you might want to mute me, Heather, because I'm going to be blasting the hairdryer. I want the paper to be completely dry before I start doing the next thing, which is the reflections and the shadows and the white boats.
Well, I'm not going to mute you if you're going to keep talking.
Okay. I saw on my Twitter feed, I was really, really excited about this. So I'm going to tell you in a minute when this thing goes off.
The dryer's actually not that loud.
No?
No. I think Zoom is muting the dryer because it sounds like background noise.
Let me just get the thing dry before I drive around.
For sure.
Anyway, I was really excited on Twitter the other day. They have pop-up ads. They had a pop-up ad for a battery operated hair dryer, which is really cool.
You can take with you.
Yes, I years ago I had asked. This is before all our good battery technology. I called Norelco and I called a couple other companies asking them if they had a battery operated hair dryer, and I got a funny reaction from. It was Norelco, and I think another company that I called said, you know, you're not the first person to ask about it, because people that have RVs would be very interested in a battery operated hair dryer for their RV. But no, they don't have the technology of the battery strong enough to generate enough heat and, you know, power to be portable. But I just saw they're coming out. I'm so thrilled if it works for us watercolor painters. That'd be so awesome. It's supposed to come out this month.
Batteries have come a long way.
You know, so our boats are going to be everything's backlit, so the top of the hulls and top of the roofs and stuff will be in light, and the color that I have down for my whites, I have some orange and yellow in them, which is be sufficient. You're probably going to, in the end of the painting, they'll look white and you'll hardly even remember that I put any color in them, but there is color in them. There's that warm orange tone and yellow tone I got throughout. So that's already done. So now I just have to paint the shadows on the boat. So again, for that, I'm going to take some cobalt blue and a little ivory black, but instead of ivory black, I'm going to use color. It's color opposite. It's orange. And I'll take a good shot of the orange and I'll put it on my palette over here. And I'll take some cadmium scarlet and I'll put that over here. And when I add it to the blue, I basically get the same color Payne's gray that I would have gotten if I added black. But I'm also going to grab this color as I'm painting in here and drop it in for some of the reflected color in the shadow on the boats. So. Up. Wet. Let me start with the dry one then. Do you hate when that happens? So the top of this boat, the roof is going to be in light, so I won't touch that. But the cabin and part of the hull will be in shadow. And again, I'm going to use the blue in here, and as I go into the side now, before it dries, I want to introduce some warm reflected color into this Payne's gray color. Okay. All right, so it's predominantly blue, and if I leave it predominantly blue, it's going to look horrible at the end, but I need some warm reflected color. So I'll take a little cat orange and a little scarlet, and I'll just drop it, perhaps not so randomly, but randomly. And a little scarlet, and then back to the blue again. So there'll be color variation within my shadow tone on the boat. And for during the reflection, this is where the flat brushes really come in handy. You load it up. I'm going to hold the brush this way, and I'm going to basically make a back and forth brush stroke to suggest the reflection. Line up the cabin with the water. If you don't have a flat and you like to do harbor scenes and paint water reflections, it really kind of important to get to use this brush. Really makes the chore of doing reflections really easy. I'm gonna leave the top part of the hull of the boat in light, the existing color that I have. And again, this part of the cabin on this boat is in shadow. And I don't want to use all, I wanted some warm reflected color in here. So I'll take the cadmium orange and the cadmium scarlet again and drop that in with the blue. Going to keep my shadows predominantly cool with little areas of warmth. And the opposite would be true of sunlight. You want to have your sunlights predominantly warm, but they can have your pockets of cool. And again, back to the straight cobalt blue and into the reflection. And again, the flat brush is really handy for doing this sort of thing. Again, reflection, a good 1/2 inch flat, put a little squiggle in the reflection shape. And now the next boat, same thing again. Payne's gray. I'm gonna put a little Windsor violet in this boat. It seems like the local color of it is on the green side. So these flat brushes are handy for what I'm doing right now too. If you want to get a nice straight line, you turn the brush and instead of holding it that way, you turn it this way and you just allow that edge of the brush to touch the paper. And then back to the Payne's gray, cobalt blue, and ivory black. By the way, I keep saying, Payne's gray. I don't use, and most people are surprised when they find out I work with black on my palette. And I had that same, if you've had some formal training in your life too. And it seems like every teacher that I had in college said never to use black. But when I began to study on my own and with certain teachers that I had that were related to Moan, who I mentioned earlier, used black, and artists that I admired used black. When I got out of art school, I worked with it all the time, especially when I was studying portrait painting, and don't buy Payne's gray. It's made with Windsor blue, which is a slightly greenish blue, and ivory black. So instead, I use cobalt blue, which is true blue, and ivory black. That way, we're able to control the amount of color that we put in our cool shadows. So there's the predominantly bluish green color in our boat. And I also want to, before it dries, I want to hit like I did in these other boats, little areas of warmth. If anybody has questions, Heather, just shoot away. I'm very accustomed. I teach all the time, and so I'm
I think
very
they're
used to
just
this.
mesmerized right now. It's pretty quiet in the question box.
Okay. Are they still there?
They're still there. There's
good.
107 people here. And
Uh.
I think your comment about ivory black was interesting because it's true. I've been told never use black.
Right. And then that comes from some teachers, artists that I truly respected, but it really wasn't until I got to Ridgewood, I studied with Arthur Maynard, who was a DeVone student, that I started to use ivory black all the time. And I think the reason why, and as a teacher of painting, I kind of can relate. I think, well, it was the Impressionists who kind of said that there was, the French Impressionists were kind of the ones that said there's no black in nature, so we don't paint with black.
Right.
But I think there was another reason why they, a lot of people in the early 20th century were reluctant to have their students work with black, was because people wrongly assumed that it was in the shadow. And the way I use it, the way I was taught to use it, was you use it as another color. You don't put, although there is black in the shadow, you don't grab the black. You make your shadows on the blue violet side. And I think, and I get it. I mean, as a teacher, I've seen, especially, and I teach a children's class, and sometimes the kids will grab the black right away for the shadow. And no, you want to make the shadow cool, not dead and gray.
So Martina, are you saying that the black makes your colors muddy? Yes.
Some people think that.
Yeah.
And I use black all the time. And I think the last criticism I might get is my pictures are not muddy.
Right.
If anything, they're they're colorful, So it's how you use it, really.
Right.
I don't say they make it muddy. It's just dangerous to continue to mix with it, and this
Yeah.
is what I've heard anyway.
And again, I'm holding the flat brush, and I'm making a side to side stroke for the boat's reflection in the water. And I got a sailboat back in here. I'm gonna do the same thing. It's in shadow. And you can see where this is headed with the contre-jour effect, right? Everything is simple silhouettes, very dramatic contrast throughout the picture. So I get why people like to paint this sort of scene, in looking into the light. And then I got a mast. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do masts, and I'm going to do the coward's way. And
I
the way
don't think that's such a thing.
I'm taking a script liner brush and I'm loading it up with my Payne's Gray, and I'm going to hold the brush kind of straight up and down. I'm going to make sure my paper is dry, and I put my arm down here. I'm going to move my whole arm and take it for my word. I have my eyes closed right now, but I know how far up I want to go. And well, that's the reason why you don't do that. A little off, but
You can erase the pencil mark.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking if there's another color good mixed with the ivory black besides cobalt blue.
you could use the ultramarine. I'm going to get a redo on that. You could use ultramarine blue. I mean, the paint manufacturers used to make Payne's Gray, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And then ivory black got very expensive, so they switched to a dye color, which is the Windsor blue or phthalo blue. So that's what they're using today because it's a cheap color. Remember, if you use ultramarine instead of the cobalt blue, you're going to have a violet shadow instead of a true blue shadow.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. Well, Adam can let me know if that answers it, but there's also another question about how do you know how to leave the light and white spaces? I guess, do you decide in advance or?
Yes, you do, right? I mean, everything in watercolor, I don't have to tell, this is a watercolor club, so everybody
Yeah.
probably gets this, right? I mean, the whites are done, right? We're painting the spaces around them. Basically, it's negative painting. And we have to, you know, like if you were working in oil paints or pastel or any other covering medium, you can always put your lights on at the very end of the painting. You know, in fact, it's the last strokes that you do on a painting is the highest light, right? A lot of oil painters will and pastel painters will work in the middle ground for so long, and that puts us at a disadvantage. It is what an advantage it is to be able to work in the middle values and not have to you know, think about the light parts first. So we plan, right? We're
And I
so
guess
smarter.
it's self-control not to want to paint on everything.
Yep. So you pre-plan where you're going to put your lights, and then you keep them in mind and you preserve them. Some people use art masking fluid to help you know, retain the white. But yeah, if you can think about where those light areas, and I did, you know, I was thinking about this boat should be the featured one. I probably would have been better served if I, at the beginning of the painting, I really made that area really super light and then darken up my lights, my whites in these other boats so that would just be slightly darker than all the rest. Everything about watercolors is a challenge, isn't it? And we have to think it out more so than other artists do. And nothing is just well, sometimes it winds up being pure chance, but the more successful paintings we probably do are the ones that are pretty well thought out in advance. But I also think that's the pleasure of this medium, is that we think about stuff. You know, we think about. I can't tell you how many times I hear from a new student. They come in and they, you know, you wrecked my life. Now I'm looking at things differently, you know, and I'm thinking about how I would paint that. And I'm only being tongue in cheek, by the way, about that, but they really do, and people really do enjoy looking at stuff in a new way. Or how would I paint that? How would I go about, you know, what would I do first? What would I do second? And I think that kind of curiosity is what appeals to us all that paint in watercolor. This boat is predominantly cool, so I'm also gonna drop in a little warm color into the, you know, into the boat for the color variation for the reflected plane. Can do the same thing in here. Also, sometimes what I like to do is I like to put the line on, the water line on the bottom of the boat at this point when it's at the moist stage of wetness. So I'm going to take a little red. So I got my cadmium red loaded up. I'm going to get rid of the water out of the brush. I don't want to add more paint. And just kind of quickly, I'm going to put a partial line in for the water line on the boat. Now perhaps this one's green, whatever. These are my.
Is it related to the color of the boat or just whatever you feel like?
It's whatever, whatever you feel like. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any particular reason why they're painted that particular color. And then again, here's a green line on this boat. I put it in while the paint's a little bit. I think that's a little opportunity for a little wet, you know, a little wet and wet technique. Now I got the fish houses back into here, and they're in shadow and they're in paint. Basically, Payne's grape. Oh, before I do that, let me just finish the little dories in the front. Again, just some Payne's gray.
So there's a question. Adam, can you ask that question? Because I don't understand what you're asking. Can you just unmute yourself?
Sorry,
That's okay.
can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, when you do the watercolor painting, some part you did it wrong. You want to wash it, then redo it. But do you do this in your painting or not?
Oh, if you
Yes,
make a mistake, yeah. I see.
you know,
Right.
what's changed my life is Mr. Clean Magic Erase.
Okay.
And that is the best thing ever invented. I use it like all the time. I prefer it over like even art masking fluid. I can, I mentioned I had that white drafting tape. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is something you can get at the grocery store.
Does it affect the archival? Do you know?
No,
Okay,
people think that there's something in it. Don't get the one that has detergent in it.
right.
That might have something that you probably don't want to add to your paper. But the what it is, it's a sandpaper, really. The Mr. Clean Magic Erase. As far as I know, it's one of those super what's the fabric called? It's a super fine, a microfine sandpaper is basically what it is. And so what you're doing is you're just removing the paint off this. And the first time you use it, you might freak out a little bit because you start to see like little crumbs coming up, and you're thinking that, oh, I just wrecked my painting. No, it's the eraser crumbling apart. So, but you could basically make a mistake, and I have can you all see that this thing right here is dried? This is some Heather, you can see that, right? Heather, you can see that, right?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
Yep. You can take, so
Oh,
this
I
is
can
Mr. Clean.
spotlight it. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, you can, that's Mr. Clean this is a piece of Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, and that's a piece of dried paint. You take this and you just wipe, and I could wipe this right down to clean paper. You can see the paint's coming up. Then you want to rinse your sponge out, the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And I can wipe this, then you can see little crumbs, but that's the magic eraser falling apart. I just erased a fairly dark color to paper white.
Right.
And that gives it's a mulligan, right? You can, when that dries, I could repaint on that. The only thing is if you do this, you can do, you get one mulligan basically. You don't get more than that. If you keep rubbing it, you're really going to wreck the paper to the point where it won't be able to repaint on. But when that dries, I could repaint over that like nothing happened. So to answer that gentleman's question, yes, if you make a mistake, you can very easily use this thing and and fix it up. Which
I have
I don't
some,
know
but I
what.
was afraid to use it.
Don't. I use it all the time. What I also like to use it for, rope that comes down, rigging that comes down from the boat. At the end of the painting, if I want to pull out a light line, I take a piece of tape, I cut a line down it, and I'm able to get all the line work into the rigging into the boat. All right.
Rain says the magic eraser is made from melamine foam.
What is it?
Melamine foam?
That's-
Melamine?
That's a super fine sandpaper. I was under the impression it was.
I suppose,
what-
I mean, foam could be sandpapery like, I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna my boathouses in the back are in shadow and they're on the cool side, so I'm gonna take predominantly cobalt blue. You can also use cerulean blue or Windsor blue, whatever. I'm gonna gray it down a little bit. And I'm gonna start putting some of the these buildings that are in shadow in the back.
How many times can you, yeah, Rain says it behaves like sandpaper, yeah. And
Yeah.
how many times can you use a piece before you throw it away?
Until
does it just
you can't use it
disappear?
anymore.
Right,
He's gonna just disappear,
disappears, okay.
Yep. So I got there's all kinds of stuff back in here. There's there might be a mast from a boat in the distance, or a pier, or gear from the fishermen, old lobster pots. You can make subtle, I'm going to make little subtle variations on my Payne's gray. So I'm going to do some lobster pots back into here. So I'm taking some green and I'm throwing into my Payne's gray, but I want the value to be all about basically the same as I go back in there, just a fairly dark shadow value. And now I'm getting, there's along the top of the pier here, it's in light. It might be a warmer color. So I'll grab a little orange and some gray. So maybe that part of the dock is in light. And then I got some of the fisherman's gear back into here. Maybe it's a pile of lobster pots. And then we go into the building. It's the motif in Rockport. So it's a very cliche red. So I'll grab a little cadmium red and a little bit of cobalt blue, some of the Payne's gray again. The roof is in shadow. Maybe its color's a little bluer. You know, these old buildings, they have a little wave in them. I never like to put the architecture in as a straight line going across. Sometimes they have a wave. I don't want to exaggerate it too much, then it looks a little cartoonish, but it's better than a straight line going across, just a little, or a curve. Sometimes the weight of the roof as it ages, it sags a little bit in the middle. How am I doing on time?
How long did they tell you you had? It's 8 minutes after 8 here.
And what time do you usually guys go to?
Oh my gosh, Margaret might have to unmute and tell me that one. If she's configured there, she's
We go till 9 or a little bit after.
right there. You are.
Oh.
You got tons of time.
Oh, I got tons of time. Good. There's a couple of birds on the roof and stuff, and you know, when you paint them, you don't have to put the legs on them. They can just kind of just do their bodies. It's amazing how you don't see their you know, the rest of their body. There's our little seagull on the top of our chimney.
So there's a comment that you can sand and wash an error with 100% cotton arches paper. Do you know if you can do it with things like Fabriano? And
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The magic eraser you're talking about?
I think he's talking about the magic eraser.
Yeah, you can definitely do it with other papers. I don't exclusively use this 300-pound paper too. I do use 140 a lot for my class, for demonstrations in my class and stuff.
And do
So,
you
yeah.
use mostly arches or do you use other brands?
You could use, you know, the only thing I might say, so some of the like Wattman paper has a soft size in it, so maybe it won't work as well with that.
Right.
Some of the other brands might be doing, you know, might have the same thing. But I think most good watercolor paper should take the abuse. And again, this part of the dock here is perhaps more in light. So I'll switch over to a warmer tone. And then we go into the pier, which is again in shadow. A good combination if you want to have a warm bluish gray, just use some cerulean blue and a little orange and a little red light. Kind of basically get the same color.
Is the light
But it's
coming
a
from?
grin
Sorry, go ahead.
back. It's coming from the back.
right or left or just in the middle?
It's probably off to the, I think it's, trying to recall, you know what, it's probably, it's off to the right back in that direction.
Okay, awesome.
Now I want to paint pretty much carefully around my boats, and I'm massing in right now. You know, I'm trying to deal, everything I'm doing is dealing with the big areas of the picture. I'm not getting caught in the finer detail. That's more towards the end of the picture. I'm not an artist that was ever taught to work like in small piecemeal bits. So I'm always dealing with big masses of color, big shapes, and then we work our way down to the nitty gritty. As a teacher, it's been my experience. There's been a lot of people that are new to painting kind of have, you know, they start off with like a 00 point and they're sitting there and they're painting. And it's really not probably the best way to approach it. We want to work with the big shapes and work our way down to the smaller stuff. As long as this edge remains wet, I should be okay. If some of this boat goes into my pier here, that's a good thing. That's a lost edge. Nothing wrong with that. And I'll bring this reflection all the way down into to right down here. The boathouse gets reflected all the way down into here. So what I'm painting now is probably the reflection of the jetty in the water.
Are the boats pretty much dry at this point, or are you just trying to leave them right?
They're kind of wet.
So are you trying to leave a space so the jetty
Yeah.
color doesn't run in? Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Now I'm painting the reflection of the boathouse in the water. And again, I'm using a much larger flat brush. This is a 3/4 inch a 3/4 inch flat. It's good for massing in big areas. And I'm getting the boats are really beginning to make sense right now and beginning to pop off the page really, really, really nicely. Things about reflections. Generally speaking, things that are light reflect a little darker. So the sky should reflect a little darker than the water. Things that are very dark should reflect a little darker, lighter rather. So let me say this again. Things that are light reflect a little darker. Things that are very dark reflect a little lighter, and things around the middle value reflect about the same. And now I got the, as I get down into the boat where it's calm, just take your flat brush and just basically go straight where there's a little ripple. Just go side to side for its texture. And I just like to, at this point, just kind of line up so everything kind of lines up pretty well. And I got the roof now. The more broken you make it appear, obviously, the more disturbed the water will look like. The more, and if it's really, really a dead calm, it's almost a mirror reflection in the water with hardly any disturbance. load it up. I'd line it up the building. I don't want to leave too many bits of white all over the place. It begins to distract. I want nice unified masses in my shapes. Line it up. Line up my chimney. And I'll continue the wall. It's a
Someone is
little
asking,
clunky. Yes,
sorry, someone's just asking if they can have a peek at the original again.
the photo.
Yeah. Even though I think it's, oh, right. Thank you.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
Something about clunky.
No. Oh, using the it was clunky. I'm using this large brush, and it does feel a little clunky to paint with it at first, but sometimes it forces you to make a good shape using a clunky, using a large. It helps you to paint a nice loose shape using this big clunky brush.
There's a question about the reflections. Will they be longer, shorter, or the same as what is being reflected? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. I
Mhm.
never know quite. There is a difference between your vantage point. I think if you're closer to the water, the reflection is longer. If you're up above the water, like looking down at the reflection gets a little shorter. And if you're eye level, it's about the same. So but don't quote me on that. That's a good question, and it's a really good book. If you like to do boats and seascapes, I highly recommend getting Ballinger's book. In fact, I have a copy of it here. This is called Painting Boats and Harbors by Harry Ballinger. It's on Dover Publications now. Dover has taken a lot of these old classic books from the 50s and 60s, and they you can find that on Amazon probably for like $20 or $10, but it's really worth it. It's a good read too. He's a terrific teacher, and if you like to paint boats and stuff, he gives you some really good advice on how to draw boats and how to paint them. Another book that I found really helpful is called, actually there's two of them I use all the time. One is called The Cat Boat Book. And this book has a really terrific reference of old cat boats from, it basically tells you all about, I have a friend, my friend John Osborne is an oil painter. That's the only boat that he ever paints is the cat boat. And they are truly, some people say that that's truly American, one of the truly American boats. You see a lot of them through New England, up through Connecticut, in New Jersey where I live, and that's and farther north, you'll see the cat boat. But it's got what I like about the cat boat and why my friend John likes to paint them so much in his pictures is when they turn, the masts make a beautiful shape. You can see it almost looks like I don't know how to describe that, but there's a nice curve in it, and they really do have some beautiful shapes when they're in the water and at sea. And then what's distinctive about a cat boat, the mast is really far forward of the boat. It's almost it's only a few foot or two away from the bow of the boat, and then they can be gaffed, which has that little triangle on top. They have a really nice shape to them. But this is a terrific book, and it's got great reference in it and some nice designs from some boats from the past. I highly recommend that if you like boats. And this is another terrific book about painting boats. It's called What Ship Is That? And it's a field, like the title describes, it's a field guide, and has a lot of military craft, but the back of the book has working boats. Here's a shrimp trawler. It gives you a little black and white. So if you're having problems drawing boats or don't have a clue, this book is really handy. And it has all sorts of, including the Jonesport lobster, which is the lobster boat, which is what I'm putting in our picture here. But it gives you a nice little graphic on the side, little hint on how to draw it. But a really terrific book. Again, it's just a couple bucks on Amazon. Ballinger also wrote another book, Painting Sea and Surf. This one's a terrific one too. If you like to do seascapes with waves and stuff, I highly recommend this book. It gives you some really good pointers on how to draw waves and how to paint them. Although they're basically intended for the oil painter, they're books about general painting principles, so they're really handy. And another book that
Yeah.
What's that?
I was asking if you had a recommendation on books on composition as well.
Who's good is I like Jack Ham. Jack Ham was a Disney animator, and he wrote a book on how to draw animals. It's a terrific book. I like, as you can see, I like these old time guys, right? There was such a glut of like painting books in the 90s in the Northlet Book Club, and a lot of them had no business. A lot of them are not really helpful at all. So I go back to all the old time guys, and I like Jack Ham, and he wrote a book on landscape, and there's a few pointers in there that are really nice. If you really want to get into it and really get is Edgar Payne's book on composition. Edgar Payne was an American, California impressionist, a really terrific oil painter, but he wrote a whole book about painting composition. It's really technical, but worthwhile. I have if you go to my website, I have a whole bunch of books. You can tell I teach a lot. So a lot of people, my students always ask me, do you have a book list? And yeah, so I'm on my line. If you go to my website, there's on the classes page, you'll find my recommendations for some books. I've got all sorts of recommendations on there for all kinds of things. Another good book that I like to read is called, it's a book called Art and Nature Appreciation. It was by an artist named George Opdyke. What a beautiful book. There were a series of essays. He was a Texas oil man, and he collected art in the 1920s and 30s. And he kept on asking art dealers, what, when he would buy a painting from them, is there a book out there that I could read that tells me why are some paintings in the history of art, and why are some artists so highly regarded and others aren't, and what makes it, and so finally one dealer had said to him, George, there isn't a book written, why don't you go write one? And he did. And he used to go around to art clubs and he would talk about art, and then he put all his lectures in a book. And what a beautiful book is. Some people hate the thing because it's a lot like Robert Henry's book, The Art Spirit, but it's better than The Art Spirit. I really enjoyed it. He's got a chapter on reflections. He's got a chapter on line. He's got a chapter on composition. It's really, they're really short essays. It's just a good book to pick up. Each chapter is a couple pages long, but I've gotten over, in the course of my life, I've really gotten a lot out of that particular book.
So some people are asked, so for people asking about the books you were showing, I'm going to suggest that they go back and watch the video when it's posted, or go to your website for your list of books.
That's right. Yep.
Because there was a lot of them. So if you want to know more about those books, just watch the replay.
I have some trees in the distance back in here, and I'm going to put them in next. I'm going to make them a little lighter as they go into as we go back. My greens, I'm going to make it it's probably an autumn or early spring picture. I forgot when I took this, but I'm going to make it into a summertime effect. I pre-mix my greens, and as I mentioned, my teacher's teacher was a man named Frank Vincent Dumont, and Dumont among other things that he taught, he liked to talk about permanence of color. And I just finished another terrific book just this past week by David McCullough. It's called The Greater Journey. It's about artists from the States in the mid 1800s to the late 1800s. They went to Paris. None of them had ever been out of the country, let alone, gone on a boat, risked their lives to go across the Atlantic to France. And it was not only artists that went; it was doctors and musicians, sculptors, and he focuses heavy on Samuel Morse, who a lot of people don't know this. He was a painter in the early part of his life. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph and Morse code, and he went to Paris as a young man as a painter, and he studied art. He copied all the paintings in the Louvre. But there were other artists, Augustus Saint Gaudin, who's a very famous sculptor, did a lot of Civil War statues in New York. And he focuses on that, and plus some doctors, including the first woman doctor who studied in France. France was at the time was the center of art, and it was the center of medicine in the world and writing. So a lot of these guys went over there. And my teacher, Frank Vincent Dumont, was basically one of them as well. But he studied at the Académie Julienne in Paris. And, if you look at some artists, especially Corot, the French landscape painter, Barbizon school painter, he, if you go see his work in a museum today, you see black trees, and he didn't paint them black. It's just oxidation over time. They used colors that weren't very permanent. So Dumont took it on in his life to work with a permanent palette. He worked with cadmiums, and he came up with a series of greens that he uses for his landscapes. And to this day, his paintings haven't degraded whatsoever because he uses these colors that are considered more permanent. And so when I studied in oils, I studied Dumont's use of green. And then when I went back to watercolor, I wanted to apply the same things to my palette that I was doing in oils. And what I use for my greens is just, I don't have a store-bought green. I use combinations of cadmium lemon yellow, and I use Winsor & Newton brand. And the brand does make a difference, which is this color right here, cadmium lemon yellow. And I use French ultramarine blue. And if I want to make a color look like it's in sunlight, I put more yellow than blue in my mixture. And if I want to make it a shadow, I put more blue than yellow in the mix. So I have this play of color temperature going on. And all it is just combinations of yellow and ultramarine blue for my greens. And you could mix any green, and probably better off with combinations of yellow and blue, rather than buying a store-bought green and assuming that it's going to be good. So in the distance, I have these trees back in here, and I want them to to recede in distance. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make them a little lighter than the rest of my landscape, and I'm also going to make them a little bluer so they recede. Yellow comes forward, blue recedes. So I got a little bit more blue. And then here's where the texture of our paper helps. If I want to indicate the tops of the trees, look how I'm holding the brush now. All I've got to do is just scrape the brush a little bit on the side to get a broken edge. It's making a liar out of me. It's not doing it well. But using the texture of the paper, I'm getting a nice broken edge to the tops of my trees in the distance. And I must sound a little manic and a little.
You sound like an artist, really.
Too much information here, I hope. You said it'll be online if people want to look at it again. Maybe you need to do that. But I know I do give out a lot of information.
But it's good information, so thank you.
Thank you. So I got my trees in the distance. I made them a little lighter and a little bluer. And again, I'll do the same thing. We want to use a relatively dry brush. You can also add, if you want to really make it recede, add a little tiny bit of red. The red will gray the green down a little bit. It'll make it look like it appears in the distance, which is what I just did. And again, I'll do the same thing. Scrape the brush on the side. Rely on the texture of the paper to give me a nice edge to my trees in the distance. How's the weather up there?
It's been pretty warm considering it's October.
Has it? It's today was a beautiful day here.
We
too.
just had our Thanksgiving, so Monday was Thanksgiving Monday.
Happy Thanksgiving. You
Yeah.
guys turkey?
Turkey for people who eat turkey and pumpkin pie. Yep.
Yeah.
The usual. It was, I don't know what Fahrenheit is. I think it was in those, high 60s.
Yeah, nice. The snow will be flying before you know it.
70 days till winter.
How many?
I think maybe it's 75 days till winter.
Now, the water reflection, kind of a thing that you can do. There's all kinds of ways to paint water reflection. I'm going to have a little disturbance beyond the sailboat back in here. And what you can do, you could indicate a small chop on the water, right? It's basically a reflection of this green in here. You can take this color, we can just do like the line work I did in here, and really texture up the edge a lot. So it looks like there's a breeze, or even scrape the brush on the side sometimes to make it look like there's a cat's paw on the distant water. Or if sometimes what happens with the reflections, there's a breeze along the edge and it softens out. In that case, just take some clean water. And you might want to sop up that excess. I don't want to pull all that green down into into the inlet. So I want to sop up some of the excess. So it's at that, I wouldn't say it's damp, but pretty close to it. And a brush full of clean water, and then just hit part of it. And that looks like another kind of disturbance on the water. But you got to watch that. It might just continue to creep down. But that looks like there's a gentle breeze on the water, as opposed to having a sharp edge. It looks more like a more of a definitive chop on the water. Now, the other thing that I would do, I have to go back now that a lot of that is dried, and I'm going to work some additional darker values into my boats, put a few portholes, work on maybe a little detail on some of the buildings in the back. For the accent on a window, like up on the top of the thing there, would be you could use You could use ultramarine blue and cadmium red deep. And what it is a dark purple. It almost looks like black, but it's just really made of a dark violet. And again, I get rid of some of the water. Paper's probably a little damp in here. There might be a window. You know, they can sock that in. And of course, if I got it up in there, I'd probably want to do the same thing in the reflection. My boat is probably dry by now. And there's a water line in there. I don't like to draw the line going all the way across. I like to make it disappear, part of a lost edge, and then a found edge again. You know, people sock in so much detail, and the viewer never gets to bring anything to your work. You know, it's nice to make the viewer, you know, to work a little bit on when they're looking at your work. And sometimes the beginner or even the intermediate painter thinks they got to put all that information in there. And what it winds up doing is it winds up looking, your painting looks like a big bore. Frederick Judd Waugh was another one of my favorite painters. He's an oil painter, but I won't hold that against him. Frederick Waugh, you can look him up. He was a contemporary.
WA?
W-A-U-G-H.
Okay.
And there's a terrific biography on his work. There was a collector in the Midwest. I think his name was Ulrich, and he used to collect his work. And it's easy to find his stuff online. Although not a lot of people have heard of him. Among people that know, he's very very collected. But he there's a biography on his life, and he wrote. He was always trying to write a book about how-to book about painting seascapes and stuff. But never completed the book. But they did. There is a couple pages on his advice, some words about seascape painting, as he puts it. And one of the things he said, the one thing that stood out to me, and I really appreciated and got a lot out of, was he said, when you're finishing up a painting, because I get a lot of people, they ask me, students and stuff, how do you know when your painting's done, right? And they keep working it to death. And there's another old saying, it's kind of horrible, but it goes like this: it takes two painters to make a painting, one to do the painting and the other to shoot him when it's done, which I think is a kind of a horrible saying, but
Kind of violent.
yeah. But Waugh had said, leave part of your picture a little underfinished. Let the frame finish the work. And I always think that's good advice. We have a tendency to, I've seen it all over the years. People just work their pictures up completely. Every inch of it is like worked up to a degree. And in the end, it's just boring to look at because we don't get to do anything. We can't imagine it. There's if you're ever in Boston, there's a museum, MFA, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Has a great collection, but there's a really wonderful Sargent painting of the Boyd daughters. I don't know if you've ever seen that painting. It's quite remarkable. But the most popular painting in the entire collection is a Gilbert Stuart painting of George and Martha Washington. They're two separate paintings. In fact, the painting of George Washington is the one that we use on the dollar bill, and there's a portrait of Martha, but they're both unfinished. They're finished enough, but they're really underpainted. You almost see the underpainting it, but it's the most popular painting in the whole collection, and I think it has to do with the fact that it's not completely worked up. People like to see the process. They think, and there's enough of it done to understand what you're looking at, but there's just something fascinating about a little bit underworked.
There's a question. So sunrise and sunset is pretty short time to do plein air.
Yes.
And so you're using a photo. Do you
normally I work? I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. It's more, I think, because your photo is black and white. Do you use a photo reference with the same color and layer value changes to
You know
compare?
what, when I go out, that's where I have studied the landscape and its effect. The photographs I use basically to help me with my shadow, with my shapes. The advantage that we have in oil paintings, when we do an oil painting, you can always fix up a bad shape, but in watercolor, you get one shot at it basically, and it's really hard to, other than using the art, using the magic erase all the time, where we can fix it. It's really hard to fix the shape after you've been putting it, and you can always tell too where you kind of try to fix up a
So
painting.
for the colors and the values, I guess you're using kind of a memory of the
Yes,
image
because
versus an actual
and then
picture.
my years of experience,
Right.
relying on the color. The photographs are bad. I mean, this is not a black and white. This is an
It
old
looks
color
black
print.
and white.
Yeah, it does, right? But you can decipher, if you look at it close enough, you can decipher some of the colors in it.
Right.
And today with the digital cameras, they're so amazing. It's almost like you're standing there,
Mhm.
but I prefer, I still think the best lenses ever made are our eyes. So I prefer to, to do that on, to paint on location, for color and for value. And I just rely on my photographs to help me with my shapes.
Right.
My friend, my teacher, my mentor, John, who I've been talking about tonight, John Osborne, paints completely from memory. And he does, really the most amazing things. He's got, great recall, but he also paints in oils. So you can always fix and adjust as he goes.
Right.
I think that's the disadvantage, in watercolor. I'm going to go for, in the time that remains, I'm just going to darken a few things and get a few darks into my, into the landscape. The roof is a little darker than the rest of the building, so I'll darken that up a little bit.
Apparently the watercolor group took a trip to Boston a few years ago and went to that museum that you mentioned.
It's
And
great.
we're checking out the Singer Sargent work.
I hope you guys made it to the Isabella Gardner Museum. There's a great story about, there was a theft there a number of years ago, and it's a Netflix show now. It's called This Is a Robbery, and it was about the heist. They stole about 8 paintings. There were 3. I think there were 3 Rembrandts. There was a Vermeer, and a kind of tragic because there's only 32 known Vermeer paintings, and one of them is missing, and the case still hasn't been solved to this day.
Yes, they went to the Gardner for sure.
That is my favorite museum of all time. They got
When
a
you-
great they have a great watercolor collection there too.
I actually saw a Singer Sargent collection at Brooklyn when I went to New York in the Brooklyn
Wasn't that a
Museum.
great show?
It was a great show.
Yeah.
When you do plein air, do you prefer hot press or cold press? Do you do plein air?
I just use the rough for the cold pressed.
Right. Yeah, they said it was a very interesting movie.
Which movie?
The one about the robbery.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It is really a crazy story, and the movie was really good too. I'm short of knocking in a few more darks here and there. I talk so much. I do the absolute worst demo paintings when I demo, but
That's
I
fine
hope
to
I
me.
I hope I make my point. But to finish this up, I would continue to texture up the stone wall a little bit, and continue to knock some more darks into the boats. If there's any more questions, just fire away.
Yeah, I'll nothing yet. I'll keep you updated.
So there's some darker accents into the boats, a porthole or two, be a good idea to sink into there. This is where you get down to the nitty gritty. So we switch brushes. I had a teacher once say to me too, we start our paintings with a broom, and then we work our way down to a needle. And it's that's a good way to think about at this point. So I will knock in. There's this is a jetty made of stones. They're kind of square blocks, granite blocks. So you know, I continue to work in some of the smaller shapes and lines going across. The best way to see, you know, like, you know, I often get asked, you know, which ones do you do? Is you look at the subject, you squint at it, and you try to, you see the major shapes in there, and then you know, paint the major stuff first, and if you need it, you can go through the lesser detail. I keep putting the darks in here and it keeps disappearing on me. It's funny, the humidity is really bizarre sometimes. I was out painting this morning and the ground was really wet with dew. So I figured it was going to be one of those days where the paper's going to take forever to dry, and it didn't. Things dried pretty quickly. And I've been out on other days when I thought it was pretty dry out, and it took forever for the picture to dry, which is why I can't wait for that hair dryer.
Right. Is the paper still pretty damp right now?
Yeah, I should really, and I should really hit the hair dryer in this and darken it up, and then you know, kind of work on some of the boats. What I did want to, you know, this part is almost dry. If I wanted to put a mast in here and it was really light, here's that thing with the magic erase. We'll just make sure this area is dry. Way back, we used to do this if we had a mast or a white line that we wanted to put into a painting. Take a terry cloth towel and you take a brush full of clean water. And this works pretty well. Then I got it. Let's say there's a mast to a boat back in here. Put a thin line of water on the page, and then you know what? The paper is still wet.
Lots of humidity.
Yeah, right. Just give me 1 second. Here's an old sketch. If I had a branch lighter than the rest of the landscape, let's say in this scene here, you take a brush full of clean water and you put a bead of water on the page and you let it sit there a moment. All right. Just let it sit, and then you take your terry cloth towel, and then pull off the. Can you see what just happened there? I was able to pull out that white line in there, and that's kind of nice, and you can get some medium range value in there for some tree trunks, and it leaves enough color. But what I like better is the magic erase, and I would use this on a mast on one of my boats too, but I'll just show it to you. If you want to pull a lighter branch out, you take a piece of white drafting tape and you take an X-Acto blade and you can cut a curve in it, and then if I wanted to pull a lighter branch out, you lay the tape down, and then you put a little gap in the tape. So it starts out thick and ends up thin. So I took that same piece of tape and I pushed the gap into it. And then you grab your Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, get it wet, wring out the excess water out of it, and then very gently rub. And then you pull it up, you get a nice light line in there, and you can make it any, you could basically make a stencil out of anything. You can even make a stencil out of a person. You're gonna put a figure back in there. And what I like about the Mr. Clean Magic Erase is that I can go back and get this down to white. If I was painting a sycamore, you'd probably leave it just like that. But you can also go back into it and paint in it. This other method that I showed you, sometimes the rubbing of the terry cloth towel gives it such a boost. You really can't repaint that at all. Now, if I had a mast in my boat, and then, you know, the nice thing is you just take two, I'll put another mast on this side, and I'm going to use the straight edge of my tape, put a little gap in here, equal length up because it's a mast on a boat. Again, rinse the magic erase out and then rub. And I can also do this. You can see you get a nice straight line. And you can also do this with rigging if you have some rigging on the boat. Put a nice curve in it. This line we'd want to keep real thin, like a rope line. So the gap is going to be really tight together. And then rub, or, you know, rub partial. And we have a rigging coming down from the sail, and we can make that line as thick and thin as we want. You know, like I said, in the old days, in the old days, we used to use the terry cloth towel,
Right.
but it wrecks the paper. And the nice thing about the magic erase, it's real gentle and really soft on the picture.
Amazing.
If there's any other questions, that's basically it. To finish this painting up when it dries, I just continue to knock some darks in here. That line is unfortunate. I should have waited for the paper to dry, and I could have come in there with another line. But to finish this painting up, I would continue to texture some work into the wall and continue to get some darks into the boats in the front.
Awesome.
Okay.
Any questions, anybody? Pop them in the chat. Maybe they're all just mesmerized. Do you have a mat that you can put on to have us with the look?
Of course.
Around it? Thanks. Good idea, Nancy. And are you gonna send us a picture when the painting's done?
I am not going to finish this, no.
Oh, you're like, I don't like it well enough.
You know, I'll tell you what I do. You know, I demonstrate almost every week with my classes, and what I do is these little demos that I do, and sometimes I do a quarter sheet size demo, and for instance, this was one I did, you know, a couple of weeks ago. I was demonstrating some stuff on rocks. So I took this picture, and then I'm presently working on this painting. So so I take my sketch that I do for my classes, and I work up a larger, you know, a painting that has a better drawing in it, better shapes in it, and then but it is nice to have this little demonstration painting. So I kind of it's my test, my experiment, which I make a few points, but I can also take this and base it on another painting.
So kind of like working out your details a little bit.
Absolutely. I can work out a color scheme. I kind of judge where the painting does work and where it doesn't work. And I don't have to.
When
Yes.
you do plein air, do you use a different size, or what size do you like to work with?
You know, I use all sorts of, that's a good question. I have it depends. I have a lot of time when I get out. Am I going to make a day of this? Then I might do a quarter sheet, or I might go out to half sheet. I have different proportions of paper that I use too. This is like a 14, this is a half sheet size. So it's like 14 by 20, I think. Sometimes I do 14 by 22, which is a longer rectangle. Sometimes I go down to a more slightly squarish format. And sometimes the area where I'm at might dictate the proportion. And sometimes it's just nice to mix it up.
Right.
You know?
So far I have, people are liking it. Adam, we love questions. Lovely, loved all the tricks that you were showing us. Very informative demo. It's a lovely painting. Of course it is. Not a
Thank
lot
you.
of questions, just lots of praise,
I'll
take that too. That's good too.
right?
Heather, could I say something?
Of course, Carolyn.
Okay, I just want to tell all the TWS members who are still here that Joel did a wonderful workshop with us last November. And he's going to be doing another one in the Toronto art group called Don Valley Art Club. And there just may be some spaces available that you could tag on to the group because they don't have as many watercolors, obviously, watercolor artists as we do for our group, Toronto Watercolors. So
Who's hosting the Don Valley workshop? Like who's running? Are you the workshop?
I'm running it.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
doing that one. Okay.
I'm doing that one. It's going to be November 13th and 14th.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is once we get to a certain date with Don Valley, if we don't have enough members, I'll be sending out something, maybe through Perry or whatever, that we still have room for anybody. But if anybody wants to be on a list, just in case, they can contact me. And you might get the opportunity to do a full workshop with Joel, because I think everybody who did it last time was really liked it, just like this demonstration. And I know Margaret's going to say something at the end, but maybe some other people have some questions.
And there's no questions coming in at this point, just people liking the demo, so.
And I was just going to say, I didn't ask him to do Rockport. Rockport's my favorite place to paint. I know Margaret's painted there. A few others have painted there, but I didn't ask him. I said, just do a scene from the coast. So thank you for doing the Rockport one, Joel.
Someone asked why the building is in the middle.
What's the saying? Do as I say. Do as I teach, not as I do. It is that's really bad design. You caught me. I probably should have moved it off. I probably should have moved it off to the left or to the right. It is ridiculously in the middle. So my apologies.
Also why you're not going to finish it. You were just testing out a theory. Just say you were testing a theory.
That's
You can always crop it.
Yeah, you can always cry. Is this better?
yeah, that way.
But yeah, that's kind of unfortunate that I did that. I just as I was drawing it this afternoon, I was thinking to myself the same thing. So you caught me.
It's all good. Margaret, are you up?
Yes.
All
I'm all
right.
set. So Joel, I just wanted to thank you and how fortunate we are that you are able to paint and talk and not only describe what you're doing, but to give us wonderful reference material and information on the paint and anything and everything that has to do with the painting process. It is so interesting to also, by listening to you, to think of the process by which you decide things, irrespective of putting the building in the middle. I think that happens because sometimes we get so excited that we lose track. And I am very, very grateful that you were able to do this for us. The colors that you're using are not necessarily ones that some of us would use, but it just goes to show you that we must take chances, and the quality mud is what we're looking for. I often tell my students that it's easy to get ordinary mud, but we're looking for quality mud. So there you go. So thank you so much. And thank you all for attending this wonderful demo.
Thank you, Margaret.
And I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Good night, everybody.
everyone. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Thanks, Joel. Peace out.
Thanks. Thank you.
Take care,
Good
everyone.
job. You
Thanks,
too.
Joel. You
Bye-bye.
Good night.
really imparted a
Night.
lot of knowledge.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.